Hi everyone. Checking in this week with our main topic of what happens when a deal falls through. I mean, we're in a very hot market, and there's going to be bound to be some buyers out there that maybe can't close, or maybe there's buyer's remorse. So what happens? But before we get into that, I want to let you know a little bit about what's happening with the market without getting into too much detail, because as everyone hears on the news, and I will confirm that the auto market is still very active, and the prices are still going up. And although it's been slightly quiet the past week and a half from my last update to you, letting you know that there's still multiple offers, but just less offers in those multiple offers, we're still seeing loads of activity, and we're still having record amount of listings come on the market, but the demand still surpasses that. So let's get into the main topic very quickly. What happens when a buyer cannot close on closing? Well, we've actually experienced that a couple of times in the last couple of months. And on closing, if the buyer cannot closes, the seller has the right to put the home back on the market. And if they cannot sell at the price that they've sold it at originally, they can essentially sue for the difference. And my seller in that incident asked me, well, what happens with the deposit? Will they forfeit the deposit? That becomes an argument between the lawyers, because in order for the deposit to be released to the seller, the buyers need to agree with that, and by signing a mutual lease. And what happens if they don't sign a mutual lease? Then the funds, the deposit, will essentially be stuck in the trust account for an indefinite amount of time. And so the buyers and seller, if the buyers default on closing, they have to work that out. Not the best case scenario, of course, but there is no written rule on what happens with that deposit. Theoretically, they should lose it all, but if the buyers don't sign for it, saying that I'm going to forfeit my deposit, then theoretically it's stuck in the trust account, as I mentioned. So having a big deposit when you accept an offer from the buyer, when you're the seller, definitely is very important, especially with this heated market where I am seeing some buyer remorse, buyers changing their minds, and then sellers not being able to get their funds, whether or not they're using that money to buy another home or wherever the case is. So that's one scenario that can happen. And in some instances, because the market has improved, the seller will say, well, you know what, I'm still going to go after your deposit, but I don't mind because the market has improved, and I'll probably be able to sell it for more money. So there is no one right answer on what happens when it falls through. But without a forfeiture of deposit from the buyer, well, what's the point of having a deposit in the first case, is the argument. So right now, with one offer that we've dealt and the buyer couldn't close, luckily we found another buyer for it in its place right after, and then it's going to close actually fairly soon. And then the seller is actually going to go after the buyer, the original buyer, because they couldn't close on time, and they've suffered some damages. So in essence, when a deal falls through, we have no choice but to put it back on market, because that was your intention. The other argument is, well, what happens if the buyer never signs a termination of agreement, which means that I want my deposit back, I can't close, I want to terminate the agreement. But if the seller says, well, I want the entire deposit then, well, if the buyer does not sign for it, the termination agreement, does that mean they can't put it on the market? Well, they're in breach of contract, so essentially they would be able to put it on the market. Obviously, these are circumstances that don't happen very often, even in a very hot market like this. But most importantly is, when you're accepting an offer, to make sure that you try to find out as much as you can from the buyer, and hopefully they're making a sound decision, that they have the necessary financial means to close. So I hope this information helps you a bit. I know I've barely skimmed the surface of what really happens. So if you do want more info, just let me know, get in touch with me. More than happy to explain, because this is a common question that I do get asked. Also, on one more little separate note, my team is growing, and a lot of new tools adapting to this pandemic with this technology has become very big. So those announcements are coming soon, and we're very, very excited to share them. So thanks again for watching. Thank you always for sharing. Stay active, stay productive, stay safe, and we're still selling real estate.